I don't know if we'll say anything that's life-changing today, but I certainly hope that it's impactful in some way. It's good to be with you again. My name is Keith Wilson. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Amanda. We have 3 children, Noah, Abraham, and Eden. And we're glad to be with you here at the conference. And this is something that we feel passionate about and something that we have always benefited from, is being at the conference. So you want to start that clock back there. We'll get started in this practical training. Now, what we want to do is we want to get down to the nuts and bolts of real training. And one of the things that I would like to recommend to you right away is that you find some books and material as parents to, especially if you're young parents. This is one that I recommend. It's To Train Up a Child by Michael Pearl. And you may not agree with everything in the book, but it's certainly a good start. I remember when Amanda and I were younger, and we were just becoming parents, and we thought we had things figured out, but my grandmother was quick to tell us we did not, and she recommended this book for us. So we oh yeah, I can release the children. If there's any children in the room that would like to go out, the daycare or child care is out there, and they're ready to watch your kids, so you can head out that way. So anyway, we were able to get that tool, and so I want to recommend that to you. And today we're going to speak specifically about training. There are 3 things that parents primarily provide to their children. If you've got your book there, you can see those listed. And the one of them is love. Love is dealing with significance, care and affection, communication and trust. These are the things that parents provide for their children, is love, or they're supposed to provide. The second is security. Those are needs, food, clothing. This is the basic things that parents do for their children. And the third thing is training, to be an example, to educate, and to bring your children to maturity. Being a parent, it's your responsibility to provide training to your children, and so that you can prepare them for adulthood. Training is teaching a person a skill or a type of behavior. In this book, I just wanted to quote for you real quick. It says parental responsibility. It says that parents must assume control of the moral development of their children. And again, he says, before he can decide to do good, his parents must condition him to do good. Training is all about preparing our children for adulthood. That's what our goal is, and we are responsible for that. There was a CEO who was in an interview, and he said, we're looking for a responsible person to take this job. And this applicant raised his hand and said, I'm just the guy for the job. At my last job, anytime anything went wrong, they always said I was responsible. And so I'm the guy for the job. But we want to be responsible as parents for the upbringing of our children. So we're going to continue that. Now I want to just distinguish real quick. Today we're talking about practical training, not discipline. And I want to separate that for you in your mind. If you look at Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6, it says, to train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And then if you go down a little bit further in the verse, in chapter in verse 15, it says, folly or foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from him. So there's the time for training, and then there's the time for the rod and discipline. And we're talking today about training. In Proverbs chapter 23, verse 13, he says, don't withhold correction from a child. If you punish him with the rod, he will not die. And we've always taken that to mean we can punish our children up unto the point of death if needed. Punish him with the rod, and you'll save his soul from Sheol, or from death. So we're talking today about practical training, not discipline, but discipline is certainly a major part of training. But we want to focus today on the proactive side of training. You know, discipline is oftentimes a reactive thing. After somebody's done something wrong, then we discipline. But training is proactive. It's getting ahead. It's about teaching someone to do something versus correcting them for something that they did. And I hope that we can make that point today. Your goal is to produce children who can be productive influencers of society, not dependents or criminals. How many of you know that your job is to keep your children from being dependents and criminals in society? We want them to be influencers and productive members of society. As parents, we need to have healthy conversations about how to plan out this training. Michael Pearl talks about creating an environment or a situation which gives you an opportunity to train your children. And parents, we need to come up with a plan and hopefully be on the same page with the training. Nothing can be more destructive to a child's development as to when parents are on they have two different goals in mind for their children. Or maybe a dad's trying to train here and mom is undercutting all of the authority that he's got. Or maybe mom's trying to instill some values and dad says something like, well, that's not really that important. That's very damaging to the credibility of the parent who's trying to train. And so the parents need to be together. Whether your children are developed into mature adults is largely your responsibility. We often expect our children to naturally fall into line with our expectations. And this usually happens after they have been annoying or frustrating. And we get irritated and then we crack the whip and we say, this is how we want you to behave. And we teach them the hard way. But just because your children are growing older doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to behave in this new maturity that you're expecting from them. And we just assume that because children are getting older and they're maturing physically, that they're also going to naturally get the social ethic and the morality that we would assume would come with a child that age. That's not necessarily the case. And we have to be providing clear and consistent communication about how they're to grow and develop. Clear and consistent communication. Before the conference started on Friday evening, I called Noah and Abraham to me, and they were giggling, and Noah said, we're supposed to be good and not get in any trouble, right? So he's obviously heard that conversation before. And I said, how do you know that's what I was going to say? And he said, because you tell us that every time a conference is about to begin. And I said, well, what I wanted to tell you today was behave and don't get into any trouble. And then they laughed. So I have trained them to know that when a conference is going on and I'm giving a presentation, we want excellent behavior so as to provide a good example and not to be a hypocrite. And sometimes they impress me and sometimes they disappoint me. But I remember one year we had a bit of trouble and we had to address that. So we just wanted to remind you that clear and precise communication is what children need. They need to know what you expect from them, and we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of that here in just a moment. We oftentimes get frustrated because teenagers are lazy in the household. I know many people who are frustrated because their teenagers are lazy, and if this is the case, you haven't shared the family vision with them or trained them properly. If your teenagers are lazy, it's your fault. Now, I want to say that sometimes there are differences between children. Some children are naturally doers. They want to please. They want to get involved. But then there's some other teenagers or children who naturally don't. When they hear the word work, they try to hide and disappear. And I have some of those in my house, and I also have the pleasers. And the pleasers are my favorites, and the ones that hide from work are up for adoption. But we want to recognize that not all children are the same, and we have to deal with them individually. But ultimately, if you have a lazy teenager, it's because the proper training hasn't taken place, and we want to make sure that we are not lazy going into adulthood. It's common for moms, it's common especially for moms to want to coddle their children and to serve their children, and that's good until the children are about 1 year, and then you need to stop. Because it's time to start developing in them the characteristics and the maturity that you want. And you say, well, 1 year old, that's awfully young. Well, I assure you, they're very capable of receiving instruction from you and from learning and to learn what they are expected to do. Especially if we don't, they'll become entitled tyrants. How many of you know somebody that's an entitled tyrant or a child? They expect to be served their whole life, and that's not what we're trying to produce. Moms and dads sometimes want to treat their children as special and give them all of these, shower them with gifts and so on. Amanda and I learned at a very young age that if we were trying to create in our children the character or the desired outcome of selfless and not attention-seeking, that birthday parties were going to be a big problem, because we realized that our children were very focused on being the center of attention and getting all the gifts, and were upset if they didn't feel like they were showered enough. So treating your children as special every once in a while is good, but what we're trying to instill in them is an example to serve their spouse, to serve their children, their assembly, and their community. If we constantly make everything about them and don't give them the opportunity and the training to serve others, then we'll create those tyrants. So I just want to share with you again some reasons that we don't train. I just want to brush on this real quick, and then we're going to get into the main message here, which is how to train. So why don't we train? The first reason that is typical of why parents don't train their children is because they're disengaged. And this isn't in order of priority, it's just 4 reasons that I came up with. They're disengaged. Maybe they miss the opportunities because they're not focused on what they're supposed to be doing as parents. Or maybe they simply don't care. Or maybe they're lazy. Whatever the reason is, this is a common theme that we have seen. I have personally seen it. I know people that are my age, in their early 20s, and yeah, took Solomon a minute, but when he got it, he got it. You know what I'm saying? I know parents that are my age, they have little toddlers running around the home, and they'd like to come home from a long day's work, and they feel like they need to get on their iPad and play Clash of Clans for the rest of the night and completely ignore their children, and that's unacceptable in my opinion. If you didn't want the responsibility of raising children, you shouldn't have had children. Can I get a hallelujah or an amen or something? We have a responsibility as parents to raise our children and to spend time training them. And so that disengagement is a problem. The second reason is because parents are oftentimes busy. You know, we get busy with work, or we get busy with entertainment, or maybe you have a job that takes you out of the home, and so you're not able to be in the home enough, and so you're very busy. Moms can get busy, dads can get busy, and we can all become distracted from time to time. But we have to make sure that we take the time out to train our children, because it is time consuming. The third reason is because training is annoying. How many of you can testify that training can be annoying, difficult, repetitive, and frustrating from time to time? Training is certainly time consuming, and it can be frustrating. Children learn at different paces and in different ways. What worked for one person may not work for another person. And so you have to, not only do you have to take the time to train, but then you have to take the time to figure out how to make the training effective. Try to remember if you're experiencing frustration or annoyance as a parent, and I'm specifically maybe speaking to those who are in the middle of teaching young people, toddlers or whatnot, or those who haven't had children yet. Try to remember when you're in training your children that there's a fruit that you're producing. And sometimes you don't just plant a tree and it becomes fruit bearing right away. There's a time process we talked about. And so training will produce a fruit, but it may take time. And try to also remember that just because they may not act like they care now doesn't mean they don't. And eventually they may actually recall what you've trained them to do later in life. And I know that when we think about training, especially in the service environment, Amanda and I were frustrated in the beginning because our children weren't doing well sitting through services. They wanted to get up and do what children do, and we wanted them to behave and to be quiet during the service. And so what we ended up finding out is that we kept walking out of the service all the time, and then we'd go out there and we'd switch our kids and try to get them to correct that behavior. And we weren't being proactive about it. So what we did instead is we brought the kids into the service one time, and when no one else was here, and we practiced what it is to sit through services. And some parents come to services with their wooden spoons or whatever they've got, and that's cool, but Amanda and I were too embarrassed to do that. So we decided to do it in an off time, and then we could utilize those types of materials to help train the children. And it was difficult, and it's frustrating. It takes some time, but it's well worth it. The fourth reason that parents don't train is simply out of fear. And I would speak maybe specifically to men here, is we don't know how, or we have a fear of failure, and a lack of personal confidence sometimes. And this isn't for every man, but I know men, again, who the reason they don't train is because they just don't have the confidence. They're afraid of failing and so on, and they don't have the know-how to do it. But I want to encourage you, even if you mess it up, I mean, you're going to have 3 or 4 of them, so eventually one of them is going to turn out, And that's why the firstborn are always, we know that the firstborn always get treated the hardest, because it's the training ground for parents, and that's why we typically always turn out the best. And I am a firstborn. I don't know if you would notice that by the comment. Did you know that 80% of airline pilots are firstborn? It's not a big deal, but we're pretty much in control of the world. But I want to say that just because you don't have that confidence doesn't mean you shouldn't try and get in there and get your hands dirty and train your people. Many times we let fear get in the way, and we can educate ourselves by reading books. There's a whole table back there full of books that are just people ready to pour out their knowledge and help you as parents to train your children for whatever thing you're going through. And again, I recommend this book, To Train Up a Child, and I told you about that because I feel like it's important. If you feel like you're not setting a good enough example in your home, in your personal life, then maybe it's time for you to grow up. Maybe it's time for you to change. A lot of times parents, especially I've seen where they don't feel like they're living right, or maybe they don't read their Bible enough, or maybe they don't pray enough. And so because they don't do those things, they don't feel like they can provide that training to their children, practical training. James talked about it just last night, getting together as a family and praying together, training your children how to pray, what it is to read the Bible, and so on. And so because they don't do that themselves, they feel like they can't give that to their children. So it's time to grow up then. If you're uncomfortable praying in front of your family, it's time to start praying and get over that hump so that you can become a productive person in your family and train your children. If you'd like your children to learn something, but you don't know how to do it yourself, then you can send them somewhere else to learn. We don't know how to sew, but we certainly want Eden to learn how to sew. And so we're going to either learn how to sew with her, or we're going to send her to somebody's house and they know how to sew and they can train her in simple things. If you're not good at changing the oil or whatever it may be, then you can go with your children and teach them how to do these types of things. Go learn from someone else together. Does that make sense? Okay, well, what we'd like to do now then is to get into the how-to train part of the seminar here and focus the majority of our time here. If you look in your books, you can see that there's a 4-step process. I got this from John Maxwell and also from Jim Burns, who wrote a book on youth ministry, and it's real simple. Training is all about hands-on instruction and practice. The primary goal is to provide your children with skills and competence. Again, right now we're talking about practical training. In a few minutes, we're going to be talking about character training. Okay, so we're not talking about heart issues right now. We're talking about service-oriented training. The first step of the process is I do it and you watch. Okay? It's important to know that you cannot take somebody, you cannot lead somebody where you don't know or you don't know how to get there. You can't teach somebody what you don't know. So either you have to become educated yourself or you have to send them somewhere where they can get the education. But it's important to live out the example of your training. If I want my children to learn how to do the dishes, I must first be able to, as a man, do the dishes. And it's very important for me, for my kids to learn how to do the dishes. I hope that that's coming across to you. I want my kids to learn how to do their own laundry, and so would my wife. And so we first have to be able to do that. Oftentimes, training is more caught than taught. So a lot of times, kids will see the example of mom and dad, and they can oftentimes fall into line into that training. But if you come home and you're not doing a good job, or you're watching television all night, then that's going to provide them with the training they need. So the first step is I do it and you watch. And training comes in all sorts of variety of levels, and we're going to talk about all the different things that we think is important to train in. But the most important thing is you have to be able to carry out the task that you're trying to teach. The second one is I do it and you do it. This is where they get their hands dirty and we're working together. We're doing it together. And, training doesn't have to be, where you set a scheduled time in your calendar to train. Maybe it's you're hanging a picture on the wall. And, typically that's just something you would do. But because you have children in the home and because you want to teach them and train them, you take the opportunity to say, hey, come on over here. I'd like to show you how to hang a picture and to get it level. How many of you appreciate a level picture, something that's not crooked? Yeah. And so we want to give that opportunity, take that opportunity. Maybe it's the other night I was making chocolate chip cookies, and I wanted my children to be involved in that so that they can learn how to make chocolate chip cookies. I think that's important for every human being to know how to do. And these are the things that we find important in the Wilson home. Doing the dishes and chocolate chip cookies, that's very selfish, and I hope that you can see past that. But you can train them whatever you want to do. The other night I asked Noah if he knew how to make macaroni and cheese. And he said, yeah, I know how to make macaroni and cheese. And I thought, well, by all means, make the macaroni for us this evening. And I was keeping an eye on him and watching him do it, and I realized that he did not know how to make macaroni and cheese. What he knew is how to make microwave macaroni and cheese, at school, where you just add water, put it in the microwave, push the button, and voila. A minute later, you're done. So we had an opportunity then to train on how to make macaroni and cheese. That's pretty much the only things that I know how to make in the home are macaroni and cheese and chocolate chip cookies. So all the other cooking instruction will come from Amanda, I'm sure of it. I do it and you do it is not just about giving instructions, but it's about hands-on training, explaining the purpose and the benefit of the training. So you're not just teaching them the task, you're teaching them why it's important. Why is it important that the trash can not overflow with trash and spill out onto the floor? Why is that important that we sweep the kitchen and we sweep the rest of the house? How is being a good steward play into all this and taking care of the stuff that you have? Teaching them that they're vital members of the family unit and are necessary and they have value. And a lot of kids, they don't feel like they're a part of the family because they don't have anything to do. And so we want to teach them that everybody has a job, a very specific task. You look at the military and they teach you how every person is vital, especially in the Navy SEALs. It's a group effort. Not every person in a Navy SEAL team has the same job. They don't even all carry the same weapon. There's different tasks that each person does, and it brings the unit together. And that's what a family does. It brings everybody together so that we can function successfully. Many times children don't know how they fit into the family because you haven't shown them the vision. They don't know that taking out the trash is important. They just know you want it done or whatever. And so a lot of times because they don't see how it's benefiting the entire unit, they don't have any buy-in. Your children should know how to do practical things. We've just written a few down, but they should know how to prepare their own lunch for school, wake up on time. How many of you would like a teenager that knew how to wake up on time? Yeah. They should be able to cook. They should be able to do housework, to bathe. You'd laugh, but I realized quickly that bathing doesn't come naturally to all people. There are still people in this world who are grown adults that they don't know how to bathe because you smell them in the grocery store. So my mom taught me at a young age how to wash my hair, and to this day I still do it the same way. But when our children were younger, we thought we had trained them on how to bathe, and we sent them to take a shower, and they came out smelling just the same way as they went in. And I asked them, I said, hey, what did you do in there? Did you wash your hair? No. Did you wash your body? No. Well, what did you do? Well, I just stood in the water. No, that's the rinse. That's what you do after you've washed. And so we had to instruct them on how to do it. And still today, I'll ask them when they come out of the shower, I'll say, hey, did you wash this or that? And they say yes or no. And if they say no, they're going right back in there. Not dealing with the wet dog smell in my home. So that's about bathing. It's an important one to me. They should be able to do yard work, finances, car maintenance, They should be able to take care of children. And these are all things that they're going to need to know how to do when they become adults. So these are all important things, and I want to just take some time to share with you an example here in a moment about how this can effectively work and what it looks like when it does. But the third step is you do it and I assist. So first we have I do it and you watch. And then I do it and you do it with me. And then the third one is you do it and I assist you. This is where you're ready to start handing over, and we're doing this now in our home. We're handing over the reins and things like dishes. Our kids have 3 different levels of dishes that they do. You know, they've each got a different shelf, and one of them does the silverware. And in our home, we've got 2 cabinets. One's the glasses for children, and one's the glasses for adults, because we believe in segregation like that. And they know which one goes where, and that's important. And they know where all of the stuff goes. And that doesn't just come because we kicked them in the butt and told them to go into the kitchen. It comes because we did that with them. We showed them where things go, and then we watched them do it, and we supervised that. And thankfully, we're getting to the point where we don't have to supervise anymore. So I do it, you do it, and I assist. This is an opportunity for you to tweak their behavior, to educate them on things that they could do better. But not only that, but to encourage them on well-performed tasks. If you've been training your children to do something, they don't just need to constantly hear how they can do it better. They also need to hear how they're doing it right. And, you know, this toilet looks amazing. I love how you scrubbed the inside of the bowl like that. Or I loved how you wiped the seat. But you can see that we've still got some streak marks here, and that's not appropriate. We want to make sure we get that clean. So we want to encourage them and tweak the characteristic at the same time. And that's an important thing. This is your opportunity to coach. And then fourthly, it's you do it and I do something else. Glory, hallelujah. This is the time when we can say, okay, it's time to do the dishes, and they just go in and do that. Or, hey, we want to sweep and vacuum the house, and they just go and do that. You know, vacuuming is one of those things, probably because of my, I don't know what you'd call it, but I'm not OCD. I don't have a disorder, but I do like vacuuming to be done a certain way. And so that's probably why Amanda demanded that we go to all hardwood floors. But vacuuming is frustrating, you know, because kids are just doing, you know, this and that, and it's, you know, you got to take time and, you know, do it this way, and it can be frustrating. But we're thankful when it comes to the time where they do it and we do something else. This is a time when responsibility has been successfully transferred to the child. They have ownership and confidence in it. They want to do a good job. They know what a good job looks like. You know, when we were first training our children how to clean out the van, because we don't feel like that the people who trash it should be able to just walk free while the adults clean it. And sometimes I detail cars on the side, and so I do have a very it may be coming across that I have a very specific way I like things to look. And Amanda's not like that at all. But so when we're training them how to vacuum, you know, there's a good way to vacuum and then there's a bad way to vacuum. There's a way to vacuum where it doesn't look like anything's left, and there's a way to vacuum where there's dirt and everything's still on the carpet. So when you're training your children, you need to be able to be in there and watch them. But then after you've trained them, you want them to own it. They want to do a good job. They know what it's supposed to look like. Able to complete tasks and greater tasks in the future. Why is it important that you're able to turn your kids loose with your $3,000 John Deere lawnmower in the yard and be able to trust them to not destroy it? Because if you can teach them how to be responsible with little, then as adults they'll be able to be responsible with much. It's the parable of the talents. We're training you in small things now so that when you become adults you'll be able to take on the bigger tasks. I remember working at Mid-America Wireless for one of the first times when I was a young 20-year-old, and I walked into the store for the first time, and it was filthy. There was dust everywhere. There was an office just piled with trash, and it drove me crazy. And I thought, well, this is an opportunity for me to be able to serve the company. And so I stayed late for several nights in a row and cleaned the place up. And you know what happened is that ended up becoming my store. Well, the reason it became my store was because I treated it like it was my store from the get-go. And that's what we're trying to get our children to understand, is that they own this place. This isn't mom and dad's house, this is your house. This isn't mom and dad's room, this is your room. And if you can create that ownership mentality, then that can carry on into their adult life and they can become successful. And one of the benefits, again, of them doing it and you doing something else is that sense of freedom. How many of you know that there's a lot of things you'd like to be doing other than the laundry or other than, these household tasks and so on? And there are ways that you can be more productive if you had help in those areas. And then what's not on the book, but it's fifthly, is they do it and somebody's with them. We're teaching them about legacy. Not only are we training them to become adults, but we're training them on how to train their children. We're giving them the example of training their children so that your grandchildren don't become tyrants and entitled people, but that they also have that legacy of learning how to be. And one of the examples that we have for this, it's a very basic example, is when Noah, I wanted to teach him how to do yard work because that's something I'm trying to work, it's a job I'm trying to work myself out of slowly. And so we're teaching him how to push mow, and again, it's so easy, parents. I'm telling you, it's easy to fall in the trap of I'm just going to do it because it's going to take less time and it's going to get done right. And that so oftentimes is the trap that we get into, especially with yard work. It's easy to give them the task of picking up sticks, but are you really teaching them a lot of responsibility there? No. Responsibility comes when they're big enough to get on that John Deere and ride around the yard by themselves and not kill somebody or themselves on it. And so you have to make opportunities. I would always set aside a specific portion of the yard so that they could push mow. Boys need to learn how to push. I learned how to push mow. Everybody needs to learn how to push mow. Not every part of life is getting on a John Deere and mowing. And so we have that time. And I taught Noah and Abraham how to push mow and weed eating. Nobody likes to weed eat. So they should learn how to weed eat. Okay? So, that's, again, hands-on training. It's, teaching them the different things of this is how you hold it, and the cutting edge is here, and this is what it's supposed to look like. And it is frustrating, and it takes time. It takes years sometimes for them to be good as you at weed eating. But here's the fruit. The fruit is that now Noah's 11, almost 12 years old, and one of our neighbors asked if he would like to start mowing the yard. All right, well, let's give that a try. So I didn't just send him over to the neighbor's house with a lawnmower, folks. No. I went with him the first time, and I helped him weed eat it and showed him exactly what I thought that their yard should look like and helped him clean up the sticks, and we did it together. And then he got overpaid by this lady. She paid him $60. Oh, my gosh, you're right. So I charged him a rental fee for my equipment, and I felt like that was fair. Hey, this is real-world training. You don't just get free equipment. I didn't get a free lawnmower. I didn't just think in my mind, my yard needs to be mowed, and then poof, the John Deere appeared. No, I had to go buy that thing. And so I charged him a rental fee and then my expertise fee as a training fee. So he only got to keep 50 of that dollars, and it may have been 50 and 40. But either way, then the next time, Amanda went with him, and she supervised him, but he did most of the work, and he got overpaid again. And that's a good experience for him. And so now he's starting to get it on his own, and we can be able to turn him loose on that yard, and he'll be able to do a good job without us being there, and it'll teach him he can go and make money. And the reason we're so upset about him being overpaid is because when he gets overpaid for that simple job, then he doesn't want to do any other jobs. He's like, well, I don't really need to do jobs for you, Dad, because I've got $100 in my room. And so we charge him for other things then so he can run out of that money. Another good example of training, and I'm not just talking about, these practical things, but here's a practical thing. What we discovered was that a lot of times kids don't have a concept of the value of things in your home. They don't know how much food costs. They don't know that they eat their weight in groceries every night, and you're paying for that stuff. And we discovered that one of our kids was taking his lunch to school, and if he didn't want something, he was just throwing it in the garbage. Whew. That'll get me riled in a minute. And so we explained to them, hey, this is how much food costs, and we charged them for the food that they threw away. One night we were sitting at dinner, having a good time, And I don't want to say the name of these kids, but it does happen to be the same one a lot. But he was making himself some chocolate milk. You know, we've got the big Nesquik chocolate milk because we're all about health and wellness. And he was, instead of doing things the right way, which was grabbing the spoon and dipping it out and putting in his milk, he did the kid thing, which was grabbing the huge thing and trying to tip it up and tap on it, right? Well, he did that, and he tapped on it, and of course the avalanche came, and the chocolate filled his cup and then spilled over into his plate. Okay, well, that's all funny until you have to go back and eat it, because you're not getting another plate of food. This is the food you've got. This is training. Everything's training in our house. And so he decided he wasn't going to eat it. And I said, well, that's fine, but we're going to charge you for it. So you can either eat the food the way it is, covered in cocoa, or you can pay me $5, and you don't have to eat it. So what did he do? He ran to his room, grabbed $5, came back, and handed it to me. I put it in my pocket, folks. $5 for that meal. That's reasonable. Okay, what am I teaching him? I'm teaching him that food has value and that you can't just waste the food. These are practical examples of how to train. You might think that it's practical examples of how I'm mean and want money, but it's not. Budgeting is an important thing. Tithing, training your children to tithe. How do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to teach them the 10% rule, and that's going to require some math. Littler kids aren't going to get it, but you can help them. And then eventually, hopefully, the idea is that when they get paid, then they know that they need to set a certain amount of that away. We have a tithe box in our house, and it says tithe on it, and that's where all the tithe money goes. Everything in life is a training opportunity, but you have to think train in order to get it there. Otherwise, you'll miss all the opportunities. Moms need little kids next to them when they're making dinner, and I need kids next to me when I'm changing the oil in my car, and so on. So I hope that's been a clear message for you here. We're thinking about the things that parents provide, and practical training is one of the very important things that we can do to our children, for our children. And when I was growing up in my home, my mom trained me and my dad trained me on many different things. And one of the things that I want to encourage you on is don't give up. I remember the time that my mom tried to teach me how to do laundry. And the laundry, I was probably 10 or 11, and she was teaching me all the dials, and my head was somewhere else. I didn't know what was going on. And so I tried it myself and messed everything up. You know what my mom said? Oh, I'll just do it. Woohoo! Hey, that was easy. If all I have to do is mess up in order to get out of work, I'll do that every time. Well, then I moved into my dad's house, and my stepmom figured out that I didn't know how to do laundry, and she was very patient with me and able to teach me how to do laundry, and it was good that I was able to do that. So parents, we need to train our children. This is our vital responsibility. How do they become successful adults? It's because of the training that we instill into them.